Hello everyone, my name is Katie Gonzalez. I'm with Little Angel Service Dogs, and this video is particularly geared toward loved ones of recipients that are waiting on our waiting list. Waiting is very, very difficult. Every time your loved one has a medical episode of some kind, maybe they've fallen out of their wheelchair, maybe it's difficult for them to get up and move around that day, maybe they've had a seizure, maybe it's a panic attack, maybe it's a spike or rise in blood sugar. Perhaps this is a child that has autism and they've eloped. Every single time they are struggling with their disability, they are wondering when they're getting their dog. But likewise, you have been their support system. You are aware of the daily struggles that they're going through, and you really want them to have this service dog. So this video is really for all of those loved ones so that you can understand the process of waiting to get the dog, even what it looks like after they get the dog, so that you can further support this person. I am making this video right before the holidays. I'm just putting this out because our recipients are going to be seeing all of their loved ones for the holidays. And when you see them, your question is going to be, when are you receiving your dog? And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice if our recipients could give a link to their loved ones for a video so that you can understand the process in its entirety. Let's go back a few years, potentially, depending on how long your loved one has been waiting for their service dog, and look at how they applied for this process. Now, first of all, they did a lot of research trying to find which organization or even which method would be the best route for them to get a service dog. And when they apply through our program, that application process in itself can take 3 months. It's a really long time because we do a very thorough job of ensuring that we understand everything about this person and that one of our dogs would actually be a benefit for them. We also have to make sure that our dog is going to be taken care of. We have a responsibility to our dogs and our recipients, to all of our volunteers, and also the community that will be a part of seeing how this dog assists this person when they're going out into public settings. So during this application process, we're asking for lots of details about their family, about them as an individual, where they live. I'm going to go over another list with you in just a moment, just to show you all of the different things that we're considering when we're making the best match for that person. We're also going to be having a virtual home inspection so that we can see that the dog is going to do well in that home environment. And then we are also asking for personal referrals. You might have been one of the people that wrote one of those personal referrals. And then we're also asking for medical documentation, not just to verify the disability, but we're asking the medical professional if this is a good time for them to get a service dog, if they have any other concerns. It's like a 20-question recommendation letter for the medical provider. So it's really, really detailed. And if they pass all of those different segments, they are sent over to me for a consultation. And as the director, I really like to have a hands-on approach and speak to every single person that might be getting a dog from our program. I want to make sure that they have a really thorough understanding of the process. And part of my consultation is also to ensure that they are getting a dog through the best route. And that's not always going to be Little Angels service dogs. Sometimes it's going to be better for them to owner train a dog, which means that they go out and they get a dog themselves, or they already have a dog and they're going to train it. Little Angels has an owner training program where we can help support people in locating a suitable dog, and then we help them train the dog through completion. It might be better for them to get a dog that started in training where they finish that training. That's a program that's available through Angel Retrievers. And there's other programs out there as well, but that's just another option that we like to recommend. And then we have our fully trained dogs through Little Angel service dogs. Those are basically the 3 different ways that people would go about getting a service dog. And I also make sure that they're very familiar with Assistance Dogs International. Little Angels is accredited by ADI, Assistance Dogs International. And the accreditation process is very long, it's very lengthy because it's very, very thorough. This is not just like the Better Business Bureau where people could make complaints about a business and the way that they function, but accreditation is where this governing organization actually comes out to our facility once every 5 years, and they go through it with a fine-tooth comb. They go through all of our policies. They contact recipients at random, people that are waiting for a dog, people who already have a dog. They contact our volunteers, and they contact, they have interviews with our different staff members and our trainers. And they just need to make sure that all of our policies and standards are really up to par. And our organization exceeds the standards of Assistance Dogs International. In fact, we've been recognized as having programs out there for support for waiting recipients. This video is an example of that other organizations just don't have. And the reason that we really like to have things like this video and other monthly support for our recipients is because it is, again, so hard to wait for the dog. And anything that we can do to let our recipients know that we are here for them, we know that it's difficult, we are working on getting them a dog. And this is just an example of even helping loved ones support them by having the loved ones understand the process that they've gone through. But accreditation is an important part of selecting a program to get a dog, because you don't have to do the vetting yourself. Assistance Dogs International has already done that. And just as an example, when Little Angels was founded, we were founded for 7 years. We were functioning for 7 years before we received our accreditation, because it took so long for us to get all of our policies and standards up to what was needed for Assistance Dogs International. And I can say with complete trust that if a recipient is getting a dog, any person that's getting a dog through an accredited program, they're going to receive a very high standard of care. So I like to refer our applicants to Assistance Dogs International to look at all the different options there are to get a fully trained dog. And like I said, Little Angel Service Dogs is not the end-all be-all. We are not the only option that is out there. And it's difficult for an applicant to make a good decision to go with our program in the first place if they don't have a way to compare us with other options or with other accredited programs. And so that's why I send them to the Assistance Dogs International website. And we do not allow applicants to just make a real quick decision and turn around and join our waiting list. We ask them to think about it. We ask them to talk to medical professionals. We ask them to talk to loved ones. You might remember a conversation just like that, because we want to make sure that they have a sounding board so that they can make an educated decision and not just an emotional decision to move forward in the process to receive a dog. And when they're ready to get a dog from our program, we send out an agreement to them, and it goes over all of the different requirements that we have and all of the safeguards and best practices. So that's protecting everyone involved, and it's explaining exactly what this process looks like. And of course, the applicant knew when they received that agreement, they read it right there, and they also read it on our website, that we have long wait times. That is a really unfortunate part of this industry, and that there are so many people that need to get a service dog, and Little Angels is wildly popular because we can help people in ways that other organizations can't help. As an example, Little Angels is one of the only programs out there that will place a psychiatric service dog with a child in the world. We have a program where we can place psychiatric service dogs with civilians. They do not have to be a veteran, and they don't even have to have PTSD. We are also the leader in the industry in actively training dogs to alert to seizures. We're really, really proud of that. And we are doing our best to teach other organizations and other individuals how to train their dog to alert to seizures. We do not keep that a secret because we want people to have many different routes to receive a dog, because we could not possibly place all of the dogs with all of the people that need a seizure alert dog, or all of the other different disabilities that are out there that would really be helped by a dog. So when they're choosing our program, they really have had a lot of different options to look at, and they came into this with eyes wide open, knowing that there's going to be a long wait time and that we cannot exactly identify when they're going to be receiving their dog. I do tell them also how many people are on our placement waiting list when I'm having that consultation, but I do also explain that we don't know how many people will be on the placement waiting list once they get onto it, because we have different parts of our waiting process. And if you've been with them through this and you've even financially supported or made donations to Little Angels, you are probably already aware of that we have a waiting list just for fundraising, and then we have a placement waiting list. And the placement waiting list is where a recipient goes once all of the funds have been met. When someone initially joins the Little Angels waiting list, we already have funds that we have raised from grants and sponsorships, and we are putting that money toward the goal for our recipient to get a dog. But the recipients are also signing up basically to help fundraise for this very, very expensive process. When I get further into the video, you're going to see why it's so expensive to train a service dog and why it takes so long to train a service dog. And of course, why it's so important that we are finding the exact match for each of our recipients. So part of this is that you as the loved one might not be aware of what those wait times look like, or, even comparing it to the industry worldwide, and that it is just a long time. It is years and years and years to get a fully trained service dog from any organization. And I wish that we just had dogs sitting on shelves and we could say, oh, well, this one is going to be the right fit for you. Come to handler training and learn how to work with this dog. People are waiting a really long time. So when someone does join the waiting list, they're just joining the fundraising and they aren't on the placement waiting list yet. And they might join that placement waiting list months or years into the future. So we couldn't possibly know when they're going through the consultation process how long it would actually take. And therefore, we don't know how long the placement waiting list is going to be when they actually do join that in the future. When someone does join the placement waiting list, we tell them basically what number they are on the list, but then we explain to them that while we are placing dogs in order as far as priority, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person that's number one on the list is going to receive the next dog, which you're going to get that explanation very thoroughly in just a moment. Now, when someone is joining our waiting list, I can almost guarantee that their dog is not even conceived yet. It is not born. It is not in training. Our dogs go through a lengthy process of training. They're in training for 2 to 3 years. A lot of the dogs are from our own breeding program, but we also go outside of our breeding program where we will seek out dogs from shelters and from rescues. And we also purchase dogs from breeders, and we also have some really great breeders that are donating dogs to us. There are so many people that need these dogs that our own breeding program cannot possibly match how many people we have on our waiting list. So we are looking everywhere that we can to get these dogs, but they have to be very healthy and they have to have excellent temperaments. And there's only about 1 in 300 dogs that can actually be a service dog. You have probably seen some dogs out in public that are wearing a vest, and you might be thinking that's a fake service dog. It might actually be fake. Someone might actually be trying to fake it, but a lot of the time I think that someone is just really desperate to have a dog. They have looked at the industry as a whole and found that it was a very long wait or it was very expensive to get a dog, and so they decided to try to train one themselves, and they just don't have the skill set to even select a dog that would be suitable. Let alone to give it the training and the socialization that it needs. And so they're taking this dog out into public, and these ill-equipped dogs are barking at people, they're growling at people, sometimes they're biting people, they're pulling on a leash, they're urinating on cereal boxes in the grocery store. It's a really bad situation because there are so many people that need these dogs, but there just are not enough people that are skilled in how to train service dogs. There just are not enough organizations out there to really fill that need. So yes, 1 in 300 dogs have the innate ability to be a service dog. And one of the real difficult things is that we will have dogs in our training program sometimes for 3 and even 4 years before they show us something that says to us, okay, we've put a lot of money into this dog. We've put a lot of time into this dog. We have this list of people over here that are waiting to receive a dog, but this is not going to be a good service dog. And we have to provide quality service dogs with the best dog going into the right home in the right situation, or it is not going to be effective. And it is always discouraging when we have a dog that is released from training, but it is part of the process. If we didn't do that, if we didn't have dogs that were released, we would have unhealthy dogs being placed, and we would have dogs with a lot of behavioral issues, innate temperament that would not be suitable. So while it is disheartening to have dogs be released from the program, which can stall the process, it also means that we're placing quality dogs that are actually going to help people. And I'm going to give you an example of that. We have a black Labrador who's almost 4 years old. Now, just like many of the dogs in our program, he came from a breeder, and we temperament tested both parents. We temperament tested this puppy and litter mates, and he went to our prison program for about 1.5 years. And then he came out to our Southern California region, where he went to many different foster homes. He also has come back and lived in the homes of different professional trainers that are staff members for Little Angels. And we saw that over time, he started to become a little shy around new people that he was meeting. Not that he was scared of them, but he wasn't very forward. Not very forward moving, like, oh, I want to see this person. So like if someone would reach down to pet him, he would kind of do that. Like that's really, really slight. That's not aggressive. It's just that he's a little bit shy about meeting new people. So we worked and worked and worked to see if we could get him through that. And then he was in a foster home, and this was reported to us by our foster that they had a technician come to their home, and the dog was in a crate. And the technician came in, and they've got, all the bells and whistles. They're all dressed up. They've got, tools and instruments like hanging off of belts and jangling around. And this guy's like reaching over the crate to do something, and the dog growled. Well, that's it. That's it. The dog can't be a service dog. And that's so hard for us as an organization. It's hard for every volunteer that ever worked with the dog. It's hard for the foster to even tell us that it happened. Heartbreaking for them. It's hard for all of the trainers. It's hard even for financial supporters. But if we're looking at it from the financial standpoint, people are donating to us because they want to see, a loved one helped. They want to see a lot of people helped. They want to see betterment in our communities. They want to see good quality dogs going out to help people. And that is not an example of a good quality dog. So even though it did cost us tens of thousands of dollars to take that dog through almost 4 years of training, we are still making the best decision in releasing that dog and saying, we need to find that dog a different situation. We will probably end up placing him as an in-home utility dog because he is highly trained after almost 4 years. He can do a lot of assistance tasks. He could be an excellent medical alert dog, recognizing drops or rises in blood sugar for someone that has diabetes, or alerting in advance to seizures, going and dialing an assistance dog phone, because he's going to feel comfortable with the family, and they're just going to have to be cautious like you would with most pet dogs if a stranger is coming in with a lot of things jingling off their belt and saying, okay, my dog might be uncomfortable with that. But a dog that would growl like that shouldn't be out in public settings with a large number of people moving around them all the time. It's just very unpredictable moments that are happening out in public settings. So those dogs really have to be bomb-proof. So that's probably what's going to end up happening with that dog. He'll still end up helping someone with their disability, but it's not going to be out in a public, unpredictable setting. I am going to share my screen with you so that you can see a little bit about how we're making these matches and why all of the different details matter to us. After the dog has gone off to one of our prison programs, and like I said, they would be there for maybe a year while they're in training. Our trainers there are making very detailed notes about the dog's personality, everything that they've experienced so far. That is this document over here. And so let's say that we have a dog named Brady, and let's say that he is very specifically a yellow Labrador retriever. And, I'll put today's date on there as well. And we're going to make notes with these documents throughout the dog's training because they're being exposed to new things. They're reacting differently based on, what they've been exposed to so far. We want to see their comfort level really improving. After they come out of like a prison program for a year, they're going to go work with a lot of different fosters and with our professional trainers. And that's going to happen for, an additional 1 to 2 years typically. And so you can see why we need to have so many notes all along the way. We also have training logs for our dogs. We have a lot of medical documentation for our dogs. And then even after they pass everything perfectly as far as their, training being completed and all of their behaviors are perfect. They don't need any behavior modification. They've been introduced to a lot of novel items and they acclimate very well. We have to make sure that they're passing their medical testing. And that in itself is another reason that a dog is going to get released from training. We don't get puppies from breeders unless both of the mom and the dad have their medical clearances, which means that they've had x-rays of their hips and elbows and they've been evaluated by the Orthopedic Foundation for Animals. They're going to have a heart auscultation to make sure that their heart is healthy. And the eyes are going to be looked at by a doggy ophthalmologist to make sure that the dog is not going to pass anything down to their offspring that could become a problem. But with all of that said, even if you have 2 parents with excellent hips, 3% of the time you're still going to end up with puppies that have dysplasia. We don't want any moderate and severe dysplasia because we want to make sure that the dog's going to have a long, healthy working life. And a dog that had even mild dysplasia is not going to be able to help someone with counterbalance or like opening heavy doors or helping to have them like rise up from the floor or transfer from furniture. And that's something that we can't test when the puppy is young. We have to wait until they're a certain age. So we can have dogs in training for a year or more before they have a medical clearance that fails. And they'll have, like subluxated patellas that we can't fix, or they'll have dysplasia or, something that's really going to impede their working life. And then they can't be a service dog. But again, that's one of our best practices to make sure that we're getting healthy dogs out to our recipients. But it is another thing that can delay the process in a dog going out to someone. So I'm just going to go through this form as briefly as possible. If you want to rewind the video, you can and go back and just look at more of the details. But we have to make sure that the dog is calm and non-reactive when approached by the following: men, women, and children. People wearing hats and sunglasses, people in wheelchairs or scooters, people using a cane, crutches, or a walker. We want to note the vocal scores of the dog. Now, some of these scores, of course, based on how we're filling out this form, we're going to say, okay, this dog can't be a service dog. Like as an example, vocal scores. A 4 would be this dog barks more than the average dog and it can be excessive. Now, if it's a 4 at the 6-month mark, we start to get a little concerned about the dog. But if it gets into a 3 or a 2 or a 1, by the time the dog is ready to graduate, we're good to go. So a 1 is on the completely opposite end of the scale. It would be highly surprising if this dog barked. Rarely, if ever, is this dog vocal. And then we have independent scores for the dogs. A 1 is that this dog is highly dependent on people, so much so that it would be unhappy when separated and left alone. These dogs are prone to having separation anxiety and can be vocal in their crates. That dog is going to be pretty difficult to graduate. So I can't say that we have any 1s that are graduating. A 4, this kind of gives you some personality information. So this dog is independent. They will accept human companionship, but are more content without it and would rather be alone or with other animals. That doesn't mean that they can't work, but if the person really needs going to couple and enjoy human companionship, a 4 is not a good match for that person. They're probably going to want a 2 or a 3. A 3 is like a moderate, like they'll take human attention. They're also content if you need to leave them. 2, they would rather have human attention than anything else, but they can be separated without completely losing it. And then we have activity scores. This is so important because we need to match the dog according to how much exercise our recipients can give the dog. We need to ask our recipients how you're going to be able to exercise this dog every day. Can you take it on a walk? Does it need to be playing ball in the yard? And we're asking about the neighborhood. And if there are loose dogs in the neighborhood, like how easy is it going to be for them to go take their dog on a walk in their neighborhood? Sometimes that's not even a possibility. They might live in a rural area where there are not sidewalks, and it would be difficult. They might live in a rural area where they have lots and lots of space, just acres and acres and acres. And if you've got a dog that really just does very well playing by themselves, you just go and hang out with them on, the back 40, and just that dog is just running and having a great time. This information helps us match the dog accordingly, just the perfect match. So a 1 would be a dog that is extremely calm. It is somewhat slow when working and barely, if ever, exerts energy while playing. There are dogs like this. And then a 4 is this dog can be frantic when being handled due to excess energy. Playtime is rowdy and over the top. A 4 generally is not going to graduate as a service dog. Confidence scores. Now, a 1, that dog's not going to graduate. I can guarantee that. This dog is fearful and cowers most of the time. It is difficult to coax the dog out of the shadows. If it had the choice, it would be hiding under the bed. The dog is anxious much of the time. If we go down to a 4, this dog is very confident and would only learn to feed off anxiety in extreme situations. So if you imagine, like if we brought a service dog into an international airport for the first time, and we're walking through that airport and there's just, luggage being rolled around. There's lots of noise. It's chaos. There's people everywhere. This is the first time the dog's been there, but they are still exploring with exuberance. They are excited to see all of these new things, and they're excited to smell all of the new smells. That is a very, very confident dog. And of course, we have dogs that are somewhere in the middle, like a 2 or a 3. We've got handler focus. And does this dog struggle to pay attention to their person when there are distractions? And then different recipients are able, either cognitively or physically able, to redirect their dog when their dog is distracted. And we have to look at this as a dog. It is still a dog, even though it is a service dog. If a squirrel runs in front of them, how is the recipient going to keep the dog with them? Do they have to have diligent redirection? Are they really going to have to try to get that dog's attention, or is it just moderate, like Fifi? Yeah, good girl. Oh, sorry, this was Brady. This dog's name is Brady. So there is still going to be something coming from the handler to tell the dog to pay attention to them, but is this person able to do so diligently, or is it more moderate? And that's going to be based on the abilities of the person, possibly even their personality style and how easily distracted the handler could be in different public situations. Then we're looking at dog reactivity, and like a 4 is great. This animal is friendly with other dogs at home and is not reactive towards dogs in public. A 3 is the animal is friendly with other dogs and can focus on the handler with good direction. A 1 and a 2, either that dog's not ready to graduate or it's not going to graduate. And then we've got cat reactivity. And a lot of dogs will do well with cats just walking past them in public settings. All of our service dogs have to be able to do that to graduate. But some of them do really well with cats in the home, even when the dog is off leash and the cats are just, zooming around, climbing Christmas trees and all the things that they shouldn't do. So some of our dogs are going to do great going into a home with cats, and some of them it should be without cats, but all of them that graduate are going to be doing well passing cats on walks and in public settings. A 5, just as an example, this dog is friendly toward cats in the home and ignores them well with handler redirection on walks. Looks, but leaves them alone. And then we've got prey drive, and this is really like the small woodland creatures. And so impressive to us when a dog completely ignores birds, rabbits, and squirrels, even when off leash. A 2 is a pretty typical service dog because they are still a dog. And they are usually interested in these things, but they can be easily redirected with proper handling. And then loading into a vehicle, this dog enters the car without aid when directed. That's what we want for a fully trained service dog. All of these other ones, the dog is not ready to go out as a service dog. And then tolerance to vehicle travel. Some dogs love it. Some dogs tolerate it. Anything above that, anything above here, that dog is not going to be a service dog or is not ready to be a service dog. Sometimes we can work on that and get them over it. Little bit of information for you is like golden retrievers, very common breed. That's a picture of a golden retriever behind me, used for service dogs. Many of them are car sick as young dogs, and we have to take them on many, many outings to feel better and get over it. We have crate tolerance here, and we want the dog to go into the crate when we tell them to. We want them to be comfortable in there when there are people around, when there are no people around. They can't be barking or whining and all of that. They just have to be comfortable with it. And then we have tolerance to household and industrial items. And so we know throughout the training process that they're tolerant or fearful of all of these different things. And the dog has to be tolerant of 100% of the list before they would go out and be a service dog. And I'll go through the list with you. Elevators, grocery carts, sliding doors in public, ceiling fans, vacuums, hair dryers, dog wash, loud luggage dollies or industrial carts, household toilets flushing, loud industrial toilets flushing. They are different. Toilets in public flush louder than the ones in your home. Narrow stairways, narrow walkways and corridors, skateboards, mannequins, or statues. Dogs often find those scary because they don't have great vision and there is a very still person. They're not moving. They smell strange. So we have to introduce the dogs to that. Amplification or loudspeaker, moving bicycles, motorcycles, semi-trucks, RVs, sedans, SUVs, Mylar balloons, regular balloons, paper towel dispenser in a public restroom, and even the hand dryer in a public restroom. And then we want to know, does this dog do any unexpected lunging toward insects, light reflections, laser reflections on floors or walls? And I'm not talking about like just snapping at a fly. I'm talking about like, shoo, they're off all of a sudden, and that can be dangerous. And then as the dogs are going through training, they are going to have different scores for their obedience as they're going through training. So we have L, which means that they're learning this behavior. U means they understand it, but they're not great yet. And C is consistently responds 95% of the time, the first time that they are asked, even with distractions. And we're looking for a C for all of the obedience and also all of the tasks by the time the dog is ready to be matched with a recipient. And the public access test that the recipient will take at the end of their 2 weeks of handler training also needs to be consistent. So I am not a perfect human being, and I bet you are not either. No one is perfect. We can't expect the dogs to be perfect either. So we just want them to respond 95% of the time the first time that they're asked. Sometimes we do need to repeat ourselves. Maybe they just didn't hear us the first time. Maybe they were distracted, and that's okay. But we need it to be easy for the recipient to handle the dog. if it was a hindrance for them to handle the dog, it's not a helper dog. It's not helpful if it's difficult to handle. So we have heel, and heel means that the dog's shoulder is lined up evenly with the recipient's hip, usually on the left side, but sometimes we have a recipient where we see that the dog needs to aid them on the right. And so I have my little demo dog here, very well trained yellow Labrador. And so if I speed up, the dog speeds up. If I slow down, the dog slows down. If I turn, the dog turns. And not because I'm pulling them on a leash. The leash is loose enough that the dog doesn't feel the pressure from it. The dog is staying with us almost like they're medically attached. And we want sit, down, stay should be at least 10 minutes out of sight. Imagine that. That takes a lot of training. Wait means, be patient. Don't dart through that door. Don't cross this boundary. And it's different than stay. Come, so calling the dog, and it comes to us 100% of the time for that one. Everything else is 95%. But the recalls, that's 100% because that is a safety issue if it didn't happen. Watch me means that the dog needs to look up at the recipient's eyes and focus on them. Touch means that no matter where we move our hand, the dog is going to follow, and it's very easy to move the dog around. And the name recognition. So this dog is named Brady. And so when I say Brady, the dog's already like, yes, they're waiting. They don't have to necessarily look up into my eyes, but they are ready. And they have learned that their name means that their handler has something for them. And what they've got is a treat. They don't have to hold it out in front of them. They just say the dog's name, and the dog's like, ooh, I might win a prize. What do you have for me to do? They don't have to get a treat 100% of the time for everything that they do. But this is called positive reinforcement, and we want the dog excited to go through all of these party tricks that actually end up helping someone. And then in public settings, the dog also has to be able to go through doors really well. Of course, they have to go through elevators really well and, manage stairs, staying on the exact same step as the recipient. That's a difficult thing for a dog to do because when a dog is going downstairs, they're top heavy. And so their body almost wants to fall or like go very quickly down the stairs, but they have to stay with the recipient one step at a time and stop with them so that they're not accidentally pulling them forward. And they have to go underneath a table, they have to go underneath benches, and they have to stay there so quietly that other people in the restaurant or in the classroom would not even know that they are there. If we hear the comment of, I didn't know there was a dog under there, when we get up to leave a restaurant, then we have done the right thing and our dog's doing a good job. And there's lots of different tasks that the dog knows to assist, but those are just the things that work out really nicely in a public setting for good control. Some of the tasks might be retrieval. It might be deep pressure therapy. It could be medical alert. It could be signal. It could be dialing an assistance dog phone. It could be pulling a door open or a cabinet open. It could be pushing a door or cabinet closed. It could be turning lights on and off. It could be retrieving their vest, and their vest has pockets, so that can bring, they can bring medication. They could bring a cell phone that's charged and turned off, and just, waiting to be used in a medical emergency. Take a break is another one that our dogs are trained to follow, because they have to have a break. They can't work 100% of the time. And now I'm going to come back to this specific document in just a minute, and I'm going to skip over to my example waiting list. And this is, like I said, there's going to be more people on it. The placement waiting list is long. And right at this time, it's about 115 people that are waiting for a dog. And we're placing an average of 20 dogs a year. And that information is up on our website. We're always really transparent about how many dogs we're placing. So we don't want there to be any surprises about how many dogs we're placing. But again, it's not about matching the dog with the first person on the list. We're going to go through 2 example recipients here so that you can see all of the variations that there could be with different recipients. But imagine all these variants happening, with 115 people. So we're going to list what day they joined our list at all, the fundraising list, we have that there. And then what type of dog they're looking for. So let's say that Jane needs a seizure alert dog, and let's say that John needs a mobility assistance dog. And let's say that Jane nor any residents have any dog allergies, but let's say that John's son has an allergy. And then special requests. So let's say that Jane really wants a female dog. She also really wants a golden retriever. And John doesn't care. He's like, if the dog will help me, please let me know. I'm going to say open. And then we say the date that they've been added to the placement list. We want the birth date and the recipient's age. Let's say that Jane is 16 years old. And let's say that John is 43. We're going to put their email addresses in here, of course. We want to have a date of their last maintenance report and the date that they sent that in. So each of our recipients are sending us a maintenance report every 6 months. If we don't get it from them, we ask them for it. And we want to be in contact at least every 6 months. Something really beautiful that Little Angels does with recipients that have made it to our placement waiting list is we have monthly lessons. And this is one of the lessons, essentially, because it goes over so much information. But this is the bonus one where they can share the link with you, the loved one, so that you can understand the process. And we just like to be able to provide pre-curriculum to our recipients while they're waiting. But it's just such a nice way to know that, when you're getting that new content and you're getting this new information, that you aren't forgotten, because it would feel like that otherwise. It would just feel like crickets, because they cannot be here every day with us to see the different dogs that are in training. They can't see the literally dozens and dozens of training sessions that are happening every day. We have about 70 dogs in training at any point, and each of those dogs are receiving multiple training sessions a day. So we have hundreds of training sessions happening every day nationwide. If you could be present to even a third of those, you would understand more about why this is taking so long and all the effort that goes into every single dog that's graduating, and even the dogs that aren't graduating, which is just another part of that quality process. But we know that because they can't be there every day, it does feel kind of silent. And that's one of the things that Assistance Dogs International really liked about us and asked other organizations to look at, emulate what Little Angels is doing in providing these monthly updates for recipients to keep them engaged in the process, because waiting really is just the pits. It is super, super hard. And in addition to that, we want feedback from our recipients. So it's not just us giving them information every month, but we want to get information back from them at least once every 6 months. And that could be done in the form of a maintenance report, but it could also be done by them talking to their instructor. And we have appointments available. All of the instructors have appointments available, actually a link, so that recipients can schedule a time to talk with us through Zoom, face-to-face, so that we can hear what's going on in their life. And if they have any particular questions about how the dog is going to end up helping them, they can ask that question and get the answer live from us and see our face, which is always really nice. So we will have the date of the last maintenance report listed there, and an info update, which is different than the maintenance report, because the maintenance report is a document, and an info update, that could even be by email. So I often have recipients email me and ask me questions. They want to know what number they are on the list. Like they've moved, or, they got a kitten, and they're going to tell me. And so we'll just make notes there of the informational updates. And then we have 3 different regions that our recipients can get a dog from. And let's say that Jane is open to any region. We have California, Texas, and the East Coast, which is like New Hampshire, Maine. It's like right on the border there, and like 2 hours from Boston. That's most likely the airport that you'll be flying into if you're flying there to get your dog. And in Texas, it's East Texas. We're about an hour away from the Louisiana border. Our airport is about an hour away. And let's say that John really wants a dog from the East Coast. And it could be not just because he really likes the East Coast, or maybe just that he lives there already, but let's say that it's really difficult for him to travel, and maybe it's his disability makes it even that much harder. And so he really wants to hold out to get a dog from the East Coast. And one thing that I'll say about the regions, it's nice that we have these 3 different regions, and that might even be one of the reasons that your loved one has chosen Little Angels to get their dog from, because a lot of the organizations just have one location. But if someone could only get a dog from one of our regions, we can only offer them a dog that has been trained in that region, because the instructor that is doing their handler training has to be familiar with the ins and outs of that dog. They have to know that dog like the back of their hand in order to convey all of that information in the handler training process. So that's a big key to that. If your loved one has said that they can only get a dog from one of the regions, we haven't just cut the number of dogs available in half. We've cut it into a third of the dogs available that would be a good match. Here we're going to write down the diagnosis, and we'll say that this person has epilepsy, and that John has MS. And I'm going to add something here. I'm going to say that he also has chronic anxiety and migraines. Okay, seeking medical treatment on a regular basis. Yes, we want to make sure that we are part of the medical team. And limitations, equipment usage, AFOs. Let's say that John uses AFOs, and he also has a wheelchair for longer distances. And Jane doesn't have any equipment that she uses. And then training needs. And so this is going to be what we want the dog to be trained in. So Jane wanted to have a seizure alert dog. So her dog's going to be trained in alert. It's going to be trained in deep pressure therapy. It's going to be trained in vest retrieval to bring medication, and dialing an assistance dog phone. And John's dog is going to be trained in counterbalance and dialing a phone and deep pressure therapy and retrieval, like items that he might drop. Special notes or concerns. A lot of times we have those notes in there as well. Regular outings that our recipients would go on. So let's say that Jane is going to church every week, and she loves to go to Disneyland. And let's say that, let's see, what does John love to do? He loves to go to baseball games. And then we've got pets. Let's say that John does not have any pets. And let's say that Jane has 2 cats and a 13-year-old male covers manual. Okay, ages in the home. Who are the parents if there's parents living in the home, if this is a minor? And so we would list that, and I'm not going to put that in here now, but when we have that information here, we're also going to be making a note of the personality types of each of the people living in the home. So I want you to see how complex this can get when we're making that match. So I'm going to now go to this other document where we're talking about personalities. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but basically we have 4 different personality types, and most people will veer toward 1 or maybe 2. 1 is usually the strongest for that person. Other people have learned to adopt different personality types just in communication, so that it's easier to be social with a lot of different people. Like I am an amiable person, but I've learned to be a driver. I also need to be analytical at times, et cetera, et cetera. So analytical people are very deep and thoughtful, as serious and purposeful individuals. Analytical types set very high performance standards, both personally and professionally. They are orderly and organized and tend to have a dry but witty sense of humor. The strength of analytical personalities lies in their perfectionism, and they want things done right the first time. In addition, analyticals are often economical, tidy, and highly self-disciplined. It talks about their weaknesses. They have a tendency to be moody, critical, and negative. As the name implies, they often overanalyze everything and have difficulty making decisions. Their perfectionism is also a weakness at times, as they can be guilty of making their pursuit of perfection stall completion. A new dog handler who is analytical will be nervous about making mistakes because just that morning they thought of 100 different ways the training session could go wrong. They need very exact instruction down to the T, and they need to understand why a method works, how the dog is thinking, and how it was trained in the first place. This matters to us when we're matching the dog. Also, you can see how helpful it is for us to understand that going into handler training, because we can help to assuage some of those worries going into the process and really encouraging the recipient more than normal. Like, have grace for yourself and have grace for the process. Also have grace for your dog. I've also seen that some analyticals don't do well with a silly dog. They like a dog that's more like black and white and just, does this or does that. And not one that has some unpredictability to their nature. A driver has a dynamic and active personality type. They exude confidence and naturally gravitate toward leadership positions. A driver's strongest characteristic is their determination. They are independent and they are productive. Drivers are decisive visionaries who get things done. A driver would rather make a bad decision than no decision. They just want a decision to be made. Sometimes they can be insensitive, unsympathetic, harsh, proud, and sarcastic. A new handler who is a driver will be impatient for perfecting the little things, like using the clicker for every single step or rewarding for simple behaviors. They can't wait to start going on field trips, and they can't wait for handler training to be accomplished so they can be certified. While they are very motivated, they often need to be reminded to take things slowly and to have grace for the process, for themselves, and for the dog. And then we have an amiable person. And amiable people, we have to work really hard with. It sounds like an amiable person, like they're just going to be happy with anything. No, they're going to act like they're happy with anything because they don't want to cause a stir. And so we have to be really sure when we're offering them a dog that we're offering them the right dog, and that they're not just saying, yes, I'll take that dog just to get along. It's really, really important that we're matching them with the dog that is just going to be so good for them and really be obviously a match to their personality, and to be able to assist the way that they need the dog to, and not that they're selecting the dog or accepting the dog to get along with us. A new handler who is amiable will be worried about offending other people by bringing a dog into a restaurant or other public spaces. They are worried what other people are thinking of them when they bring a dog out. They will also apologize profusely for common mistakes in early handling. They need to be reminded often that we expect mistakes and that it is part of the process. They can also veer on the side of not communicating well post-handler training out of a concern that they will bother their instructor with too many questions. Let me just say, and this would be a great time to talk about post-handler training, is after 2 weeks of handler training, we are in daily contact with the recipient, and then we are in contact with them at least once a week for the next month, and then at least once a month for the first 6 months, and then again at 9 months, and then again in a year, and then at least every 6 months after that. It's a lot of support that you get from Little Angels. You almost can't get away from us because we are so communicative. But again, we're not just communicative because we like to talk a lot. It's because we need to make sure that that is assisting that person. And an amiable person doesn't always test that there is a problem because they're worried about stirring something up or worried about us thinking that they're doing something wrong. And that's not the case at all. A dog is a dog. And, human is human. And we're not always going to be perfect. We need to work on the little things and perfect a lot of little things. Like the analytical people are going to do really well at like looking at those little things, but we have to encourage them to have grace for the process. And then the amiable person just doesn't want to cause a stir and let us know that bad things are happening. And a driver just wants to be done with the process. They want to get it done and move on. So the handler training process, that's important, but also the right dog is going to be really helpful here. And then we have expressives. These are like the most fun friends that you have. Like think of a friend that just is always going to make you laugh and is really entertaining, and that person's probably an expressive. They want to feel included in everything, projects, teamwork, conversations. A great strength of the expressive personality is that they're very outgoing. They are ambitious, charismatic, and persuasive. They can also be disorganized, undisciplined, loud, and incredibly talkative. A new handler who is an expressive will often get distracted during instruction and have difficulty focusing on the task at hand. So if we have an expressive and we're watching them walk down the street with their dog, they're often like so engaged with the scene around them that they're not as focused on their dog. When they are focused on their dog, it's really exuberant, it's super fun. And so we need a dog that is generally on the calmer side because we don't want them feeding off of each other if they're both more active. And we need a dog that's calm but really focused on them, and a dog that's not as easily distracted by things in their environment, and a dog that doesn't need to have diligent correction or diligent observation from the recipient. It would just be like moderate. I was going over that earlier. Moderate or diligent redirection from the handler. This expressive person is going to be one of those people that need a dog that would be okay with the moderate redirection because they're not going to be focused on their dog 100% of the time because there's too many other things to do. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're looking at for personalities. And then we're going to list the personality types of each person that's living in the home, not just the recipient. That will make a difference for us when we're making the match. And we want to know the recipient's activity level and frequency of outings into public settings. That's really important. The dog's exercise needs or restrictions. And this is how this person is able to exercise a dog. Like, can they take the dog on a walk? And also looking at the weather where this person lives and how the weather is going to play into how they're able to exercise the dog, and possibly the disability might affect how they're able to work with the dog. In some cases, the person would be able to, take the dog out on a walk. But if they're concerned, like because they can't go and do it alone because they have seizures, then that's not going to be a possibility. So they might need to play ball with the dog in the backyard. It just depends on the individual. Seizures alone certainly wouldn't mean that would be the case, but it's just an example. And it varies person to person. We want to know if they live in a metropolitan, which is like a city area, or suburban or rural. And we want to know what the dog activity is like in their neighborhood. So as an example, a metropolitan area often has lots of dogs out on walks, and we see something happen culturally where in some cities, the handlers of pet dogs allow the dogs to be way ahead of them, and they're okay letting the dogs go into other dogs' spaces, which is not good. for a service dog. The dog cannot say hi to other dogs. Service dogs cannot say hi to other dogs. They also should not be pet by random people out on the street. We want the dog to focus and stay focused on the handler. It's also not safe for pet dogs to be coming into the service dog's space because they might be aggressive and hurt the service dog, and be really difficult for a service dog to overcome that and get past it mentally. When we do know that they live in a metropolitan area, we want to know what that dog activity is like. Is it cultural for dogs to be coming into other dogs' spaces? Or that, when I say cultural, like that's just the culture. That's what other people see other people doing. And so then more and more people tend to allow their dogs to do that because it's normal for the area. And then other areas, all the dogs are really well behaved. And someone that didn't have a well-behaved dog would be like, I can't take my dog out here in this area because my dog's not like these other dogs where it's well-behaved. And then you also might have loose dogs in the neighborhood, and that's obviously not safe to be walking the dog there. And so that's going to matter about what dog we place with you and how we recommend that the dog is exercised or where they're walked. And some dogs that are going in, well, actually all dogs that are going into a metropolitan area need to be on that really high scale for confidence. They should be a 4 because it's very chaotic in a metropolitan area and somewhat unpredictable in that way. And we want to know the height and the weight of the recipient, and that'll help us know, like if the dog's going to be doing counterbalance or, something that where height and weight is an issue, we would want to know those things. So let's go back and we'll say that we've got Brady, and I said that Brady was a yellow Labrador, didn't I? So if we're looking at Jane wants a female golden retriever. So already I have to skip past Jane. Jane's not a match. And then when I look at John, I see that John is allergic, or I guess I said his son was allergic to dogs. And so Brady is not a match for John either, because he's going to need a poodle or a doodle, something that's hypoallergenic. And so I could just keep going down this list until I find someone that's open to having a yellow male Labrador. Who knows how long I would be going down that list until that happens. Let's also say just right off the bat that Brady is on an energy level, he's about a 2. So he's fairly calm. And let's say that even though he's a Labrador, he doesn't love retrieval. He just doesn't love it. He is very, very cuddly, and he loves to have contact with people. And let's just use that information to start with. So we go on, of course, he wasn't a match for either of our first recipients, but we'll just keep moving. And let's say that Brady is in training in Texas. And so if we go backwards and let's say that Jane was okay having a yellow male Labrador, we would see that, she could get a dog from anywhere. This is still a possibility. If we did have to get down to John, we would say, okay, he's not an option for this dog because he's on the East Coast and this dog is in Texas. This dog's really cuddly, really interested in people. So this dog could be a good seizure alert dog. Let's just say that even the breed would be okay for John. Let's say that they didn't have any allergies to dogs, that they could have any breed of dog. But Brady does not like to retrieve. And that's one of the things that John needs the dog to do for him. And so that's like we saw over here, it was counterbalance, dialing an assistance dog phone, deep pressure therapy. The dog could do all of those things, but not retrieval. And so that alone would make me go past John. And that dog's not a good match for him. Going over the tasks that were needed for Jane, alert would work, deep pressure therapy would work, vest retrieval, nope. Again, that dog's not going to be a good match because of the vest retrieval. So I would need to skip past her as well on that one. And this dog would do totally fine in either of these hobby settings. And let's say that this 13-year-old male Cocker Spaniel does not get along well with other male dogs, but it does well with females. We wouldn't be able to match a male dog with Jane. So that would be a skip. If everything else was okay with Judge already, we found different reasons why that wouldn't be a good match for him. Pets in the home, no other pets, so that would be totally fine. And then we're going to look at the personality information. So let's say that we have Jane, who is an analytical person, and let's pretend that this dog matched every other thing so far, and we've gotten all the way to personality notes, and I said that this dog was, on the calmer side, really cuddly, and he would do fine with an analytical person. So that would be really nice. And we could look at other details too. Sometimes a lot of our even adult recipients are not going to be able to handle the dog on their own, and there's a caregiver that lives with them, and they're going to handle the dog on that person's behalf. So let's say in this case that Jane was not able to handle the dog completely on her own, and that her grandmother that she lives with, she has stepped forward and says that she's going to be the handler of the dog. So we also want to know the personality notes for the grandmother and make sure that that also matches this dog well. If we went down to the activity level and frequency of outings, since we have a really calm dog, that's going to go in well with, I would say, the majority of people. But there have been a good number of times when I've offered a calmer dog to someone and they say, that's not going to work for me because I really like to take walks. I love to go on hikes. I am a very active person myself. So we have recipients that are already very, very active, and the dog has to fit into that very active lifestyle. And then we have recipients that are not already active, but they could be, and they would be joyful to be active with the dog, and they would love to take this dog on long walks. So you can see how there's a difference there, where if Jane was a person that just like one of her favorite things to do is to go out on a walk, and she wants to be able to go on walks independently, and this service dog's going to be able to help her do that for some reason, and then that would not be a good dog for her, because this dog is so low on the energy scale that he's not going to do well with those long walks. Dog's exercise needs, how she plans to exercise the dog, which sometimes is different than the activity level and like how often they're going into public. Several of our recipients live in metropolitan areas where they walk everywhere because it's easier than trying to fight the traffic. There's so many options, and where you're going to go eat, you could go work over here, and you could just walk everywhere. They're going to sometimes be walking 3-5 miles a day, and so we have to have a dog that's not low energy to be able to keep up with that and still have the energy to do all of their tasks and maybe any other activities or outings that the person wants to be able to do with this dog. And where they live now, this dog, even though he's really calm, he could still be a really confident dog. And so if they did live in a metropolitan area, then that would be okay. Again, we would ask those questions about other dogs in the neighborhood and what the culture is. And if the dogs are in other dog spaces, would we have to suggest to them that they're going somewhere else to exercise their dog? Sometimes that would be the case. And the height and the weight doesn't matter too much for Jane, but it would matter for John because he wanted counterbalance and he wanted a dog to help him transfer from furniture. And let's say that Brady is a big dog, and he's 75 pounds, and the height and weight match up really nicely for the dog to be able to help John. So you can see how I could go down this list, and I could go down pretty far before I find a match. There are so many details here in trying to match that perfect dog with the perfect recipient that we regularly are skipping past the teens. So if someone is at the top third of our list right now, we are often looking at them in consideration for our dogs almost every time that we're matching a dog. Of course, we're always starting at the top and then working our way down. And if someone is at the very top, sometimes it's because they have a detail in their life that just makes it extra particular for us to match the right dog for, or they have something where they have a preference. The more preferences they have on, if this is a male or female, and, golden retriever or Labrador, I want a black Labrador, or I only want to get the dog from California, or I can only get the dog from California. All of those details come into play. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of everything that's involved in the matchmaking process. I know that you really desperately want your loved one to get their service dog. It is going to happen. They just don't know when. And we often get that question phrased exactly like this. I know you can't tell me exactly when I'm getting my dog, but do you have any idea when I'm getting my dog? And you can see from this video that we don't have any idea. We wouldn't be able to say, I think it's going to be in the next 3 months. Because when we have a dog that's ready to be matched with someone, that dog is mostly done with their training. Now, like in the case with Jane, we would ask her for a scent sample so that we can train the dog to alert to Jane's seizure scent in advance. And that could take an extra month or two before she would get the dog, but we would already match the dog and she would already know that she's getting it. But we often don't know who's going to be getting the dog until minutes before we offer it. And even then, when we offer the dog, so much of the time, the recipient can't accept that dog or they don't want to have that particular dog. One of the matches that I made really recently, it was passed on twice by other recipients higher up on the list. And one of them, they didn't want the dog because it was a black dog and their family member had a bad experience with a black dog before. And so they wanted to pass on that dog. And that was a detail that we just didn't have written down yet. We did have written down that it does not want a black Labrador. And we're like, okay, well, this is a black doodle. And so we offered the dog, but then it turns out it was no black dog. No, doesn't matter the breed, just no black dog. And then the next person we offered the dog to, they were actually going to university. They were going to go study abroad. And they were going to do that in like the next month. And it was really bad timing. You cannot go through handler training and have a major life change happening at the first time because there's 2 major life changes happening. You really want as much of the rest of your life as easy as possible or as typical as possible before you add in this major life change of having a dog, because when you do, you are learning how to live life differently. You now have a shadow that's following you around, and it does take a lot of attention to detail in order for it to be successful in the beginning, but eventually they will have guests over to their home and it will look like they have a pet dog until that dog does something very special for them. And then the loved ones are reminded, oh yes, this is the service dog. This is the one, that I supported. This is the one I've been talking to you about every Thanksgiving for the last few years. So excited that you have this dog. So hopefully that's been a helpful and informative process for you and how we make the matches and everything that's going on in this training process. If anyone ever wants to reach out to us and talk to us, we would love to have you join in with our recipients on our Zoom calls. So you are able to speak with me or speak with your loved one's instructor. We love to have extra people join in on those calls because, again, that recipient, your loved one, is going through a hard time. And the more people they have to help them through this process, the better. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. You have a wonderful Thanksgiving.